At 6:40 p.m., the Fellowship Hall of Shiloh Missionary Baptist glowed with those cheap gold chargers that look expensive in photographs. I was ladling giblet gravy, no lumps, not on my watch, when Darius scraped his spoon against a glass. The sound was bright as a needle. "Family," he said, lifting sweet tea like it was champagne. "To family that knows its place and purpose." Laughter scattered across the room, polite and sticky. I saw Alana's smile hold a beat too long, the way a curtain pauses before it falls. "I'm 62, not fragile. I've sorted bills for 30 years and held a dying man's wrist." Still, the word place sat heavy, like a stone at the bottom of my chest. Leonard's empty chair rested at the head table, his camel coat folded over the back. October 2nd took him in one unkind night, and people keep thinking grief makes a woman blind. They forget grief sharpens. "Evelyn," Darius called, "you okay standing or you want to sit?" He didn't offer his chair. He offered a stage. "I stand just fine," I said, smoothing my navy dress. My hands remembered sorting mail with the machine screaming, the way paper slices flesh if you don't respect its edges. "At my age, I don't shout. I document." He clinked again. "To honoring Dad's intentions," he added, voice silk. "We'll be tidying a few things next week. Lawyers, filings, nothing for folks to worry about." Ruth's hand squeezed my elbow. Under the roar of serving spoons and the children's squeals, her whisper seemed to float. "Clock's ticking, May. December 2nd. We'd all seen the letter, engram and slate, embossed, smug, possession to be transferred by December 24th. A Christmas eviction dressed in legal ribbon. I'd tucked that letter inside my Bible at Psalm 27 because the Lord is my light, but I keep receipts too. A boy bumped me. Gravy dotted Leonard's coat. I dabbed the spot and felt the hem pull, a tiny snag. My fingers, trained to find loose threads and counterfeit apologies, found the line of bad stitching. The coat was heavier than it looked. "Mind the heirlooms," Darius said lightly. "Some things don't belong to everyone." "Like decency?" I said. His smile didn't move, but his eyes went flat. "We can talk Monday, after the holiday." He turned to the crowd. "Y'all, let's not trouble Miss Evelyn with details. She's been through enough. I've learned to choose myself without apology." So I carried the coat to the kitchen, set it on the stainless table, and worked my seam ripper, just a bobby pin bent mean, along the crooked thread. The fabric peeled like a secret. Inside, a folded stack, crisp as communion crackers. I washed my hands. I dried them. I read the first line, "Last Will and Testament of Leonard A. Carter," dated October 1st, 2024. Somewhere behind me, chairs scraped. The pastor called for gratitude testimonies. Darius's voice rose, booming cheerful. "I'll start us off." I slid the papers back into the coat, pressed the hem closed with my palm, and looked at the clock above the coffee urn, 6:52 p.m. My window was thinner than pie crust. If stories like this help you breathe, tap like and subscribe. I keep receipts. Subscribe to our channel. This helps our work reach more people. The bank stamp on page 2 read, in blue ink, $85,000. Cash. By 7:10 p.m., Pastor Hill's bow tie leaned left the way it does when he's nervous, and plates of dressing had cooled into squares. Darius finished his testimony, long on adjectives, short on nouns, and folded Alana into his side as if he feared she might float away on a better truth. I stepped back into the hall with Leonard's coat over my arm, the hem pressed flat with the heat of my hand. An usher pressed an envelope into my palm. Thick, official, engram and slate again. The seal cut my thumb as I opened it. "Per our review," it read, "the 2017 will stands. Kindly vacate 1440 Walden Street by December 24th, 5 p.m. The line that snagged my breath. "As you were not legally wed until January 2020, your claim to pre-existing assets is void." I could taste the ink, cold and tinny. Darius watched my face the way a cat watches a bird bath. "No surprises, I hope?" he said, voice too casual. "Just timelines," I said. "You know how they tangle." He leaned in, breath of peppermint and control. "Let's not be adversarial. Dad wouldn't like that. Dad wouldn't like theft, Ruth said, materializing with a plate of pie she had not touched. She nurses nights. She recognizes low blood sugar and lies from across a room. Darius smiled past her. We'll set a meeting. Monday at 10. Bring your papers. He pronounced the last word as if I were a child clutching crayon drawings. The clock in my head rattled. December 2nd to file, 8 business days away. The hidden will in my sleeve felt like a live thing, but paper is only power when ink meets daylight, and daylight needs witnesses. Alana drifted closer, nails perfect, eyes slippery. Darius says the house needs renovations before we list, she murmured, then flinched at her own boldness. It's what Dad wanted. Did Leonard tell you that? I asked. Her glance slid to the floor. I needed more than a document. I needed a chain, date, time, stamp, witness. I needed to show the $85,000 didn't evaporate into charity like Darius claimed. I needed to prove Leonard changed his mind on October 1st, voice intact. In the kitchen, I opened the code again long enough to scan the pages with my phone, front, back, the notary seal smudged at 6:12 p.m. I slid the PDFs into a folder named Walden Truth and backed it up to the little drive I keep on my keyring. The one Leonard bought me for our courthouse wedding on January 7th, 2020, after we'd eaten catfish and laughed at how love can be plain and still holy. I returned to the hall in time to hear Darius promise the church a $10,000 donation from Dad's legacy for the youth wing. Applause swelled. My cheeks burned. He was buying saints cheap. Pastor Hill handed me the mic. Sister Evelyn? A word? I took the microphone. My voice felt like a ladder rung, sturdy if I trusted it. I'm grateful for breath and bread, I said, and I'm grateful for documents. They keep memory honest. Darius's smile thinned. Alana's fingers worried her napkin to lace. The room hushed, forks held midair. I lifted Leonard's coat and slipped my hand into the hem. If you put that down, Miss Evelyn, Darius hissed, low and urgent, I won't have to ruin you tomorrow. I didn't read from the coat that night. Sometimes power is a seed. You ruin it if you dig it up too soon. I let Darius finish basking beneath the fluorescent blessing of Shiloh's ceiling lights and took Leonard's coat home, folded over my arm like a flag. The house at 1440 Walden Street breathed the way old houses do, settling beams, ticking baseboards. On the mantel sat our courthouse picture from January 7th, 2020, me in a navy skirt, Leonard in a gray suit with the same camel coat slung rakishly over his shoulder. I set the coat down beside the photo and felt the old wound open like a paper cut you forget until soap finds it. In 1994, Leonard promised me he'd put my name on anything he owned if we ever became permanent. Back then, I ran routes out of the Bay Street station, learning every cracked curb in Savannah. He was a cook at Pruitt's Catering with proud hands and a laugh that hid in his chest. His son Darius was 7, sharp in all the meanings. The day Leonard didn't show for Sunday dinner and sent a single chrysanthemum instead, I understood. Men who fear being poor sometimes bank their hearts with other people's roofs. I waited 25 years, and then he came back to me, not as a boy looking for a meal, but as a man who had learned to say, Evelyn, I was wrong. We married quiet. We paid the mortgage together. He promised again, your name May, on it all. Now he was dirt, and I was paper. Paper wins if you keep it dry and in order. I pulled out my 2024 wall calendar, the one with a magnolia painted across June. I wrote, File Will, Deck 2, 8:30 a.m., Chatham County Probate. I wrote, Meet Engram and Slate, Deck 3, 10 a.m. I wrote, Bank Request, Nove 29, 9 a.m., Coastal Federal. Then I opened a shoebox of receipts the way some open Bibles. Leonard kept everything. Oil changes, a donation to Shiloh Youth, $250, RO8 to 12 to 24, and slipped between coupons a pale blue slip stamped in sleepy ink. Coastal Federal Credit Union, RO9 to 18 to 24, $85,000, cash. My heart thudded in my chest, slow and stubborn. Darius had told the pastor that Dad always believed in giving back, and the room had swallowed it like cobbler. But $85,000 in cash doesn't stroll into heaven. It lands somewhere with a thud. I turned the receipt over. On the back, a scrawl like Leonard's but tighter, as if the writer kept glancing over his shoulder. For transition expenses, DC. The letters D and C kissed each other like gossip. Ruth called. You sleeping? Not yet. The clock may. Don't let grief make you slow. Grief makes me precise, I said. Outside, a train horn cut through the humid dark. I slid the blue slip into a plastic sleeve and filed it behind Walden Truth N2. I touched the coat pocket again, felt the will like a spine, and thought of October 1st, 6:12 p.m., the notary's seal. If Leonard made a last correction, to whom had he been speaking at 6:23 p.m. when the voicemail I hadn't yet played waited like a match in my phone? I put a kettle on and set my alarm for 5:45 a.m., the hour I like because the world hasn't had time to lie. But why was DC written in a hand that looked nothing like Leonard's? At 5:45 a.m., I rose, made plain grits, and sat at the kitchen table with the things that now constituted my life: the camel coat, a bobby pin bent into a seam ripper, a plastic sleeve holding the blue bank slip, and a small USB drive shaped like a brass key. I pressed play on the voicemail dated October 1st, 2024, 6:23 p.m. Leonard's voice staggered a little, like he was walking while speaking. May, I signed it. It's right where you told me to hide things I'm too proud to lose. If Darius shows you anything from Engram before Sunday, don't sign. I'll be home by 7. We'll eat catfish. His laugh, soft, the way men laugh when they're thinking of kitchens, rattled, then cut off in a cough. Love you. I held the phone to my chest until the screen went dark. Then I scanned the will again, this time reading each line aloud to the cheap clock on the wall, just to hear truth in air. I, Leonard A. Carter, revoke all former wills, devise to my spouse, Evelyn May Carter, share in Pruitt's Catering, 40%, residence at 1440 Walden. At the bottom, notary, Nina Caldwell, GA NAR N55204, 10-01, 2024, 6:12 p.m. Darius had a copy of the 2017 will naming him and Alana beneficiaries. Engram and Slate had waved it like a church fan. But paper has ancestry. The later child inherits. I flipped back to the blue slip. The front was clean. The $85,000 cash stamp at 2:37 p.m. Aero 9, 18-24, teller initials AG. On the back, that note again, for transition expenses, DC. I fetched a letter Leonard wrote me in 2021, a grocery list with hearts in the margins, and placed it beside the slip. Leonard's D always leaned left. This one stabbed straight down. His C looped open like a smile. This one was pinched tight. I snapped a photo and added it to Walden Truth N1 with the tag, hand mismatch. At 9 a.m., I walked into Coastal Federal Credit Union wearing my Sunday hat and my weekday patience. The lobby smelled of lemon cleaner and coin. I need a copy of a transaction from September 18th, I told the clerk, badge reading A. Green, the same initials as the teller stamp, for probate. She looked sympathetic, then wary. We can only release images with a subpoena or executor authorization. I'll have both, I said, because faith without works is just wishing. On my way out, a bulletin board caught me. Community Giving, Shiloh Youth Wing, goal $50,000. A printed list of donors: Pruitt's Catering, $5,000, D. Carter, $10,000, pledged. Anonymous, $5,000. I took a photo. Money leaves footprints if you stop sweeping behind it. Outside, Mrs. Pruitt waved me over from her van, the one with Pru-IT on the plate. Child, I've been looking for you, she said, pressing a thumb drive into my palm. From our lobby camera, 9:18, 2:30, 2:40 p.m. I didn't see nothing, except who came out with a white envelope and looked both ways like the Lord wasn't watching. Who? She didn't blink. Your stepson, in a navy suit too shiny for daytime. Back home, I slid the drive into my laptop. There he was, 2:37:11 p.m., Darius at the counter, shoulders squared like a man about to be brave with other people's things. He took a white envelope, heavy enough to bend. He didn't look happy. Men who do right don't scan for cameras. I printed a still and dated it in ink. I wrote N3 in the corner. Then I took the will again and traced the notary's name with my finger, like a prayer. When I ironed Leonard's coat before rehanging it, the heat lifted a faint smell from the wool, sea salt and cornbread grease, and something else metallic, like a key dropped in a stew. The notary seal bore a faint phone number impression beneath the stamp, 5 digits ghosting up where the ink bled. By Friday, November 29th, 9:14 a.m. On the line at probate snaked past a corkboard of estate sales and grief counselors. I took a number, B47, and tucked Leonard's coat across my lap like an oath. The fluorescent lights gave everyone bad skin and equal judgment. A clerk named Devon called me up and examined the packet I slid through. Certified copy of the death certificate, our marriage license dated January 7th, 2020, my sworn statement, and the will from October 1st, 2024, notary seal clean as a church bell. He weighed it with his eyes. If uncontested, he said, letters testamentary could issue within 10 days. Uncontested? I smiled without showing teeth. Darius has a lawyer on retainer and a smile he rents out by the hour. Devon leaned closer. Then you'll want extra certified copies, $10 each. I counted cash, $60 for 6, feeling each bill like a breath I couldn't spare. Money is a thermometer. It shows exactly how hot the room is getting. My checking balance would be $412. 17 after this. Stakes are the parts of your life you can list by dollar and deed. On my way out, my phone pinged with a text from Engram and Slate. Reminder, Monday, Dec 2, 10 a.m. Bring any documents you believe relevant. I saved it to Walden Truth N1, timeline pressure. I stopped at Pruitt's Catering to check on the books Leonard used to keep in a green binder. Mrs. Pruitt smiled me into the office. We got hit with an expense in September, she said, tapping the ledger with a pen. $2,500, transition consulting to D. Carter Holdings, LLC, no invoice attached. Transition to what? I asked. Less of us and more of him. She shrugged. Leonard argued with him Sep 30, 8:10 p.m. in the parking lot. I heard loan and keep your hands out my man's pocket. I wrote N3, testimony, and the time in my notebook. Mrs. Pruitt slipped me a photocopy of the ledger page. If he comes asking, she said, this never left my desk. Back home, I spread everything across the dining table like a crime scene map. N1, contradictions and the Deck 2 clock. N2, the bank stamp $85,000, cash with teller initials AG. N3, CCTV still, 2:37:11 p.m., 09/18/24, plus Mrs. Pruitt's testimony. N4, the will, notarized 6:12 p.m., 10:01-24, and the voicemail at 6:23 p.m. The trigger object, Leonard's coat, lay in the center, hem newly hand-stitched with my thread so it wouldn't spit secrets before I chose. Ruth called from her shift. Keep your head, May. Don't let him push you into shouting. At my age, I said, I don't shout, I document. At 4:00 p.m., Darius rang the doorbell and didn't wait to be invited. He walked in wearing that navy suit too shiny for daylight and set a glossy brochure on my buffet. DCH Renovations, he said. We'll list Walden Street at $389,000, minimal staging. If you cooperate, I can authorize $5,000 for your transition by December 24th. We look generous. You look wise. I'll look lawful, I said, and you'll look dated. October 1st outruns 2017. His jaw moved like he had a lemon seed stuck in a molar. Careful, he said softly. Perjury is a felony. So's theft. And so is misrepresentation, I said, sliding the $85,000 stamp between us like a playing card. He glanced down. His mouth twitched. Dad had plans, he said. He told me to manage them. Then why is D. Carter Holdings, LLC holding Pruitt money for consulting with no invoice? His eyes clicked. You don't understand business. He recovered his smile. Sunday dinner at Pastor's? We'll make a show of civility. Monday, we sign. If we dine Sunday, I said, we'll eat truth. He picked up his brochure, left his cologne, and paused in the doorway. Last chance for grace. Grace is for sinners who ask. After he left, I ran the iron over Leonard's coat to smooth where my hands had trembled. The notary's name ghosted again under heat. Nina Caldwell, GAN 55204. And beneath, the faintest 5 digits pressed into the wool like a whisper, 2074. But why would a notary's stamp leave a phone number's tail that starts with the church's own exchange? Sunday leaned in with cinnamon and pageantry. Pastor Hill had invited both sides of this family for a reconciling meal at 4:30 p.m. In the small dining room off Shiloh's kitchen, the one with the framed photograph of the 1998 choir and a thermostat that lies. The clock over the pass-through ticked loud and smug. I arrived early with collards and the coat. Darius and Alana drifted in at 4:42, perfectly late. He set down a pecan pie from a bakery that abbreviates sugar with price. Pastor clasped our hands and said grace that felt like a fire drill. "Ground rules," Pastor said, tapping the table. "No accusations. Only next steps." Darius nodded gravely. "I propose a $7,500 relocation stipend if Miss Evelyn vacates by December 10th, 5 p.m. Documents will reflect Dad's 2017 intent." I folded my napkin. "I propose the law." He smiled at Pastor. "Forgive her tone. Grief distorts." "Grief clarifies," I said. "Also, I brought a copy of Leonard's October 1st will." Darius's eyes flicked to my hands. I let him see only my empty palms. Alana picked at her cuticle. "Maybe we could combine," she whispered. "Share proceeds." "Alana," Darius said without looking at her, "we're not auctioning a memory." Pastor slid coffee our way. "What evidence do we accept?" he asked, peacemaker voice like a worn hymn. I placed on the table a single certified copy, probate file, November 24, C. 1187, and the photo still of Darius at Coastal Federal, 09/18, 2:37 p.m., with the white envelope. "Where did the $85,000 go?" I asked, soft as soup. Darius didn't blink. "Dad withdrew that for a kitchen upgrade. Cash is king with contractors." "Name one contractor," I said. He lifted his cup. "I don't keep receipts for other people's comfort." I smiled like I was tired. "I do." Pastor cleared his throat. "Let's schedule Monday's meeting with both counsel present. No more surprises." Darius nodded, relieved. 10 o'clock. Engram and slate. We'll put this to bed. I excused myself to the kitchen and opened Leonard's coat behind the swinging door, heart ticking against the hinge. I wasn't going to reveal the will yet. Not to Pastor, not to Darius, but I needed a pressure point. I slid the coat's hem wider and felt along the inner lining seam. My finger caught on a hard ridge. Not paper, plastic, a key card, matte white, no logo. On the strip, ballpoint impressions barely visible if I turned it to the light. 2274, NCALD. I recognized the ghost name, Nina Caldwell. My breath came in clean. Notary as in person, not just stamp. A trail. Darius pushed through the door like he owned hinges. "Still hiding in kitchens?" he said. He glanced at my hands. "Looking for a recipe?" "Only one for humility," I said, slipping the card into my sleeve. He took another step. "Sign tomorrow, and I'll make sure Shiloh's youth wing bears Dad's name. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what engram files, elder neglect, undue influence, things that make reputations porous." I laughed once, low. I was his wife, not his nurse. Juries don't parse soft words. He leaned in. "If you step into that church tomorrow, I'll..." By Sunday, December 1st, 3:15 p.m., Savannah's sky had the color of dishwater and the mood to match. I spread my copies again, chasing calm with a ruler and a pen. Every line straight, every staple tight. The clock on my stove clicked like a small animal in the walls, the kind you hear only when the house is too quiet. A courier slid a thick envelope under my door. Engram and slate, cream paper, heavy as a threat. I slid it open with Leonard's pocket knife. Notice of potential claims, undue influence, elder neglect, conversion. If you persist in asserting a superseded will, we will seek immediate injunctive relief. Offer of relocation stipend, $7,500, expires Deck 2, 9:59 a.m. They wanted me hungry enough to be on time for my own surrender. Ruth called from the hospital break room. Coffee hissed in the background. "May, I love you, But these men have suits and stamina. Take the stipend, keep your health. My health is in the truth, I said, voice steady but thin, and in not letting a boy pawn Leonard's name for a wing of drywall. The church group thread pinged. Shiloh family updates. A photo. Darius with pastor, hand on a novelty check, $10,000 pledge in block letters. Captions with praise hands and hearts. I saw one comment, "Anonymous gifts are the holiest," and felt my cheeks burn at the anonymous $5,000 I'd seen on the credit union board. Buying sainthood wholesale. At 4:06 p.m., my phone lit with a text from Alana, a number she'd never given me. I can't fix him. If he asks, I didn't send this. An attachment, a forwarded email from Darius to Engram dated Sept 19th, 5:42 a.m. Draft the transfer documents. Dad is ready. He had told Pastor he was at a contractor meeting at 6 a.m. that day. I saved it to Walden Truth N1, Contradictions, and stared at the timestamp until my eyes watered. A lie is just a time that won't fit. I tried Nina Caldwell's name on the county registry, but my laptop wheezed and stalled like a choir van. I dialed every permutation of 912-22207 before the phone scolded me for excessive attempts. I left a voicemail for the notary number listed on Leonard's will, no greeting, just a beep, and spoke to air. "This is Evelyn May Carter. You notarized my husband's will on 10/01/6:12 p.m. I need your journal entry and any witness, please. Tonight." At 5:01, the doorbell rang. A uniformed officer stood with a pamphlet about elder services, eyes apologetic. "Ma'am, we received an anonymous call about potential coercion surrounding an inheritance." He looked around my tidy living room. Dustless picture frames, a calendar with 3 dates circled in red. "You seem organized." "I'm a retired postal clerk," I said. "We file before we feel." He left the pamphlet. The humiliation was gentle and careful and meant to crush. I set the brochure beneath the $85,000 stamp and watched the pile bow. I reheated collards I didn't want and stared at Leonard's coat. The key card in my sleeve felt like a flat bone. I turned it over under the lamp. Matte white, no logo, only ghost impressions on the stripe if I angled it like a secret. 2274, NCLD. I pressed it against my palm, hard enough to leave a rectangle. My breath fogged the plastic and revealed one more line in the condensation. Faint, almost shy. Chatham Co-work. Guest. At 7:58 p.m., the church thread announced tomorrow's agenda. Gratitude testimonies at 6:45 p.m. Bring a verse. My verse would be dates and amounts. I picked up my purse, slid the key card beside my driver's license, and took Leonard's coat from the chair back. The thread of my courage felt thin as dental floss. The lock at Chatham Co-work, Suite 22074, blinked red twice, then green. The Chatham Co-work building on Habersham Street keeps the lights low to flatter entrepreneurs and their ideas. At 8:36 p.m., Ruth idled the Corolla under a palmetto, squinting at me through the windshield like I was a teenager about to make a bad kind of memory. Have you been through something similar? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every comment. It's important for us to know we're not alone. "You sure?" she asked, engine ticking. "The key card says I'm invited," I said, and showed her the ghost letters again. 2274, NCLD. "If I'm wrong, we'll go home and make tea. If you're right, then I'll make history." Inside, the vestibule smelled like printer ink and ambition. I pressed the key card to the reader. The light gave me green like a yes that had been waiting months to be asked. The clock above the kitchenette read 8:41 p.m. One hand passed Prudence. A bulletin board listed members and suites. N. Caldwell Notary and Mobile Services, Suite 2207-4. They'd misspelled her name. The well had been dropped like a fact in a storm. I touched the paper the way I touch gravestones, respectfully and to feel if the truth is cold. The corridor camera blinked. I blinked back. Past a glass pod with ergonomic chairs sat 2207-4. Frosted glass, a ficus too brave. The keycard chirped. The lock thunked like relief. Inside, a desk with a brass plate. Nina L. Caldwell, GA Notary, your N55204. The ghost of the L comforted me. On the desk, a notary journal, black faux leather, a pen on a chain like a captive bird. Beside it, a plastic tray of fresh ink pads and a bowl of stale peppermints. "Hello?" I called, because I am someone who announces herself to rooms, not just people. A woman turned in the back doorway, cardigan slipping off one shoulder, readers perched on her head. "Office hours are, oh." She took me in. Sunday dress, coat over arm, fear held like a violin under the chin. "You must be Evelyn." "You must be the proof," I said. She shut the door softly behind her and came close. Her badge read Nina L. Caldwell. Her eyes read tired but exact. "I've been waiting for you to call," she said. "He told me you would." "Leonard?" She nodded. "He was here October 1st, 6:08 p.m., signed at 6:12, sat right there." She touched the chair as you touch a shoulder you remember. "He asked me to text him a photo of the acknowledgement. I did." She pulled out her phone with the care of someone lifting a relic. "And he recorded a short voice memo for my journal because we'd had trouble with a different client's family last month." She met my eyes. He anticipated trouble. She turned the notary journal to me. Entries neat and soldier straight. 10/1/2024, Leonard A. Carter, last will and testament, driver's license, GA, 6:12 p.m. Signature present, sound mind, witnessed by N.L. Caldwell. She slid a photocopy across the desk. "You can take that. I keep the original." My knees unlocked. "I need you in a room tomorrow," I said. "Engram and Slate, 10 a.m., or at Shiloh at 6:45 p.m. if they force me to breathe truths into a microphone." "Both," she said, "and I have more." She opened a file drawer and pulled a manila envelope labeled Carter, personal. Inside, a printed screenshot of her text to Leonard at 6:14 p.m. With the notary acknowledgement attached, his reply, "Ty E. will be relieved," and a selfie I did not expect. Leonard and Nina, both holding the will at the bottom, time-stamped right there in the corner, the way phones insist on witnesses even when people don't. "If you can send me the original image file," I said. "With the metadata, I can make a copy with the XIF intact." "You speak like a niece of mine," she said, smiling in spite of the hour. "Sit. We'll airdrop everything." We worked while the building hummed like a hive. My phone filled with neat little squares of salvation, the journal scan, N2, the selfie, N3, the text history, N2, and the voice memo, N3. Leonard's voice saying, "Nina, this is Leonard Carter, signing of my own will by my own mind, for my wife, Evelyn." Date 10/01/24, 6:12 p.m. "Lord, keep us honest." My eyes stung. Nina squeezed my hand. "He looked sad, not sick," she said. "Clear. Sometimes clear is the bravest thing." Ruth texted from the car. "You alive?" I sent a photo of the journal with my thumb in the corner like a signature. I tucked the manila envelope into the inner pocket of Leonard's coat, next to the will and the key card that had become a skeleton key. The coat felt heavier, but it was the kind of weight a woman chooses. On our way out, the corridor camera blinked again. Nina looked straight into it and said, "For the record." When I turned the key card in the door, the lock clicked. Behind us, in the quiet, a printer woke and began to spit out access logs for October 1st, and one more name scrolled at 5:53 p.m. that I did not expect to see. Monday, December 2nd, 9:56 a.m. The lobby at Engram and Slate smelled like citrus and copy toner, expensive air. I wore Leonard's camel coat and a dress the color of steady. The clock behind the receptionist clicked like a metronome for liars. Ruth squeezed my hand, then took a chair near the window where she could see the street and the truth coming. Darius arrived at 9:58, navy suit winking under the fluorescence. Alana hovered half a step behind, lips the red of apology she'd never be allowed to say out loud. Mr. Engram bustled in with a leather folio and the patience of a man who bills by the sip of water. We sat. He spoke first. "Mrs. Carter, let's resolve this efficiently. The 2017 will is clear. Your marriage date is January 7th, 2020, and pre-existing assets." I unfolded one certified copy like a hymn sheet. "October 1st, 2024, 6:12 p.m. New will, later date, properly notarized. I slid it across. Today is Dies 2. Probate clock met at 8:31 a.m. with receipt. File number 24, C1187. Engram's pen paused. He scanned the seal. Caldwell, we'll verify. We already did, said a voice from the door. Nina L. Caldwell stepped in, cardigan exact, badge bright. She set her notary journal on the table and opened it to 10:01-24 like a pulpit Bible. Entry: Leonard A. Carter, will, driver's license verified, sound mind, signature witnessed. Time: 6:12 p.m. She placed a photocopy of the entry and a selfie of Leonard holding the will, time-stamped 6:13 p.m. in Engram's line of sight. And Mr. Carter recorded a memo for my journal. She pressed play. Leonard's voice, clean as gospel. My will for my wife. Date and time stated. Nobody forced me. Darius's jaw worked the way a man grinds teeth rather than swallow. Photos can be doctored. Nina's mouth didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. Metadata says otherwise. I'm happy to supply XIF files. Also, Chatham co-work logs show my office entry at 6:07 p.m. and exit 6:29 p.m. I slid the CCTV still from Coastal Federal, 2:37:11 p.m., 09:18:24, white envelope bending under its own weight, across the conference table. Then the bank stamp, $85,000, cash, with teller initials AG. Where did this go? I asked, soft enough to seem kind. Because Pruitt's ledger shows $12,500 to D. Carter Holdings, LLC for transition consulting with no invoice, and the church bulletin lists your $10,000 pledge. I pointed at the picture of Darius mid-withdrawal, eyes scanning for witnesses. Cash doesn't evaporate. It converts. Engram lifted his hands, palms like clean dishes. We are not discussing donations. We are discussing patterns, I said, and timelines. You told Pastor you were in a contractor meeting Sep 19 at 6 a.m. Your email to Engram requesting transfer drafts is stamped 5:42 a.m. I printed it. Truth keeps better when laminated. Alana's breath caught like a slipped stitch. Darius flicked her a glance that could bruise. Engram closed the folio. Given this material, our position adjusts. We recommend a standstill pending court confirmation. He turned to Darius, voice thin as paper. Aggressive filings would not be prudent. Darius leaned forward, smile returned but all gums. You want a deal? Keep the house. We take Pruitt's share and bank accounts. The will's ambiguous. Ambiguity doesn't come with notary seals, I said. And Pruitt's shares are listed expressly, 40% to me. As for bank accounts, show me the ledger entries for $85,000 in or out, and we'll talk like family. He stared long. Something behind his eyes did math and didn't like the remainder. You're making enemies. I'm making records. Engram coughed into his fist. We will, of course, inform the court that there is a later instrument. Mrs. Carter, please provide us copies of everything. He tried a smile. No need for drama at church tonight. I stood. Tonight isn't drama. It's gratitude. I lifted Leonard's coat, feeling the key card and manila envelope heavy in the lining. And I have one more thanks to offer. Alana caught my sleeve at the elevator. He'll hurt you, she whispered. He already tried. I pressed a half-size printout into her palm, the bank stamp, the time. Hold this. When you're ready to leave him, walk with it. On the sidewalk, Ruth squinted at the access logs Nina had printed for me and tapped a line with her nail. May, look who badged into Suite 22074 at 5:53 p.m. on October 1st. The name was crisp as a hymn. H. Wendell Hill. I do not shake easily, but the letters H. Wendell Hill rattled like a spoon in a glass. 5:53 p.m. Oct 1, 12 minutes before Leonard signed. My pastor, the man who had clapped Darius on the back and prayed peacemaker, had walked into Nina's hallway as if into a wardrobe of secrets. Maybe he was called to notarize something else, Ruth offered, voice gentle. Or called to escort a lie, I said. The clock on my dashboard read 11:42 a.m. By night, the sanctuary mic would be live at 6:45 p.m. I had 7 hours to turn silence into structure. I built the structure. At 12:10, I stopped at Office Depot and printed 4 tabbed binders. A. Will and Notary, Journal entry, selfie, EXIF printouts. B. Bank and cash, stamp, teller initials, AG, CCTV still. C. Pruitt's ledger, $12,500 to DCH LLC, Mrs. Pruitt's testimony, 09:30, 8:10 p.m. D. Timeline contradictions. Email 5:42 a.m. 09:19, Church Pledge Board, Chatham Co-work access log. I labeled one slender envelope Pastor, private, and tucked the access log photocopy inside with a post-it. We all walked into that hallway. Let's walk out clean. At 1:35 p.m., I met Nina at Coastal Federal. She presented her commission like a shield. I presented the probate receipt 24C1187 like a second one. The manager, hair sprayed into certainty, frowned, then said, "We can release the image of the withdrawal to the executor named in the later will pending verification." 20 minutes and a copier later, I held a page where Darius's signature angled across a disbursement request like a man trying to outrun his own name. At 2:22 p.m., I walked into Pruitt's. Mrs. Pruitt pulled the September ledger and a crinkled carbon sheet. "Your boy had me sign this consulting acknowledgement without a vendor number." The date in the corner, Yo-9-1924. The time Lois had written next to it, 6:05 a.m., her attempt at neatness dragging one digit too long. I made a copy and wrote in the margin, N2, uninvoiced. At 3:10 p.m., I parked under Shiloh's live oaks and went to the sanctuary when no one was looking. The air held that mild, holy dust that makes you whisper. I slid a manila envelope into the pocket of Pastor Hill's Bible cover, not the pulpit Bible, but the worn one he carries, left of the second row. Habit makes footprints. Then I walked to the fellowship hall and asked Usher Idella to put my name on the testimonies list. "I'll be brief," I said. 3 minutes. 2 dates. She tapped her pencil. "Child, you grieving. Don't you make more." "At my age," I murmured. "I don't make. I reveal." By 4 p.m., my dining table held stacks with office supply dignity. I threaded the will back into the coat hem, then stopped and took it out again. No more hiding. I placed the original in a clear sleeve inside binder A and a backup copy on my brass key drive. The coat would be the theater. The binder would be the law. Alana texted a single word, "Sorry." Then another, "Tonight he'll try to control the mic. Then I'll hold it tighter," I typed. At 6:12 p.m., Nina pulled into my driveway. We sat with the engine off. "If he lies about October 1st, she said, "I'll speak simple." She handed me a thumb drive with the voice memo copy and the photo originals, uncompressed. Truth deserves its full size. We walked into the fellowship hall at 6:41 p.m. The room smelled of reheated grace. Pastor lifted his eyes from his program and flinched when he saw me carrying Leonard's coat over my arm and binder A pressed to my ribs. His gaze dropped to his Bible. His hand slipped into the cover. The envelope we had both pretended not to anticipate shifted like a fish in a net. Idella touched my elbow. "Your third," she whispered. Darius hovered near the podium, practicing a smile in the reflection of the coffee urn. He did not know that when he grinned, a vein near his temple betrayed him like a loose thread on a bad suit. When Pastor called my name at 6:45 p.m., the ushers parted and the fellowship hall gave a small, collective gasp, because in my left hand I carried Leonard's coat, and in my right the microphone, and I held both like they were mine. The kitchen at Shiloh holds heat like a secret. At 6:52 p.m., Idella whispered, "Pastor wants a word before you. Testify." She led me through the swinging door into the walk-in pantry where the hum of the cooler made everything sound further away and truer. Darius was already there, leaning against the steel prep table as if posing for an honest life he hadn't earned. Pastor stood near the ice machine, hands folded over his tie, as if prayer could be worn. The pantry light buzzed, and the cheap clock above the industrial sink ticked toward 6:55. Darius smiled first, all surface. "Evelyn, let's not turn gratitude night into court. Put the papers away. I'll increase the stipend to $12,500 and a moving crew by December 15th. I'm not merchandise," I said. "And Leonard didn't leave me for auction." Pastor's voice lowered, pastoral and practiced. Sister Evelyn, there are channels. We should respect counsel and order. I pulled binder A from beneath Leonard's coat and placed it on the table, opening to the Notary Journal photocopy. Order looks like this: 10:01:24, 6:12 p.m., entry by Nina L. Caldwell, and this. I slid the Chatham Co-work access log beside it, tapping the line, H. Wendell Hill, 5:53 p.m. Why were you in the hallway outside her office, Pastor, 12 minutes before my husband signed his will? He blinked. It took effort for him to land the lie. I was visiting a congregant. Name them, I said. Silence drew itself long as a hymn without words. Darius stepped in, voice sharpening. This is beneath you, Miss Evelyn. You're tired. Memory gets inflexible at your age. At my age, I said, I don't shout, I document. I slid binder B forward, the $85,000, cash stamp, teller initials AG, the CCTV still of Darius at 2:37:11 p.m., 09/18/24, the white envelope bending. Kitchen upgrade? Contractor names? He shrugged. Paid day labor, no invoices. Then why did Pruitt's ledger show $12,500 to D. Carter Holdings, LLC on 09/19, 6:05 a.m.? And why did your email to Engram timestamp 5:42 a.m. asking to draft transfers if Leonard didn't sign until 10:01? Darius's eyes flashed flat. You stole that, Will. You made him sign when he was weak. The cooler hummed a note lower, like the room disapproved. I breathed once, deep. I have Leonard's voice from 6:23 p.m., 10:01 confirming the will of his own mind. I have Nina. I have copies filed at 8:31 a.m. today. Probate, Yark 24, C 1187. What I don't have is patience for boys who bank on a widow's fear. Pastor reached for the binder. I set my hand over it. He flinched as if I'd burned him. My presence at that building was pastoral, he mumbled. Darius asked me to advise, just to keep peace. Darius cut in, low enough to fog a mirror. You walk out there with this, and I will have Engram file an injunction by tomorrow, 9 a.m., and a report to Adult Protective Services tonight. I'll tell them you forged, that you isolated Dad, that he begged to see me, and you hid the keys. I will stain you so thorough, even Psalm 27 won't lift it. Then do it, I said, and let Leonard's camel coat slip off my arm onto the steel table, the way a gauntlet drops. Because I've already pressed upload. Cloud doesn't fear men. He laughed, short. Upload what? Your stories? I slid a thumb drive across the metal, the one shaped like a brass key. His hand twitched, then stayed. You want to bluff a man who lives in suits, he said. You'll lose breath before I lose money. The door swung open. Nina stepped in, calm as a ledger, cardigan straight. If you plan to accuse forgery, Mr. Carter, please look into the camera. She pointed to the tiny black dome in the corner, church pantry CCTV the deacons installed after a ham went missing in 2019. For clarity. Darius's smile thinned to nothing. Pastor's phone buzzed in his palm. He glanced at the screen, face draining. Wendell, I said softly, who's messaging you from Chatham Co-work at 6:56 p.m. on a Monday? He put the phone in his pocket like a hot stone. Evelyn, he said, voice gone thin. Please, for the church. For the truth, I answered, and picked up the microphone Idella had slipped through the door like a secret. At 6:59 p.m., the pantry clock ticked and the hum of the cooler lifted into air like a curtain as the first notes of the doxology swelled through the wall and the sanctuary waited for my breath. When I stepped back into the fellowship hall at 7:01 p.m., a hush followed me the way a tide follows the moon. I carried binder A open to the notary page and Leonard's camel coat over my arm. The microphone weighed what a promise weighs. Family, Darius began, angling for the mic, smile tuned to public. We're all grieving. I held the mic to my chest and looked at Idella. She looked at me. Then she crossed her arms. Sister Evelyn has the floor, she said, voice brisk as starched linen. I took one breath. Tonight, my gratitude is simple, for dates and amounts. A few murmurs, a few small laughs that didn't know what they were laughing at yet. I lifted the clear sleeve. October 1st, 2024, 6:12 p.m. My husband, Leonard A. Carter, signed a new will in the presence of notary Nina L. Caldwell at Chatham Co-work. This supersedes any prior instrument. I let the plastic catch the light and then handed binder A to Usher Idella, who marched it to the nearest table like evidence to an altar. Nina stepped forward to the front row, lifted her badge, and spoke cleanly into the air. I notarized Mr. Carter's will. I have journal entries, a time-stamped photo, and a voice memo where he states his intent. The room shifted. A physical thing, like pews sliding under news. Darius laughed a shade too high. This is embarrassing. Anyone can print a photo. I raised binder B, the $85,000, cash bank stamp, teller initials AG, the CCTV still of Darius at 2:37:11 p.m., 09/18/24, the white envelope bending like a gilded knee. 2 days after Leonard told me he was reworking things for the house, and for me, $85,000 left the bank. Darius said, kitchen upgrade. There are no contractors and no invoices. I slid a copy of the ledger entry from Pruitt's to the table. $12,500. D. Carter Holdings, LLC. Transition Consulting. 09/19, 6:05 a.m. There are, however, transfers to his own company and a pledge of $10,000 to this church. I looked at Pastor. His mouth pinched like a seam about to pop. Murmurs rose. One sharp, Lord, from the choir corner. I let the room taste that, and then turned a page in binder D. Sept. 19, 5:42 a.m. Darius emailed his lawyer. Draft the transfer documents. Dad is ready. At 6 a.m., he told Pastor he was with contractors. Time doesn't bend just because a man wants it to fit his story. Darius lunged for the mic. I stepped back and held it high. Stop slandering me, he shouted. You manipulated a sick old man. Nina's voice cut crisp. He was lucid. He recited his address, his wife's full name, and the assets to be devised. I declined to backdate a previous client last month. I don't move ink for lies. The hall rotated, slowly, then all at once. Mrs. Pruitt stood, apron still knotted, voice carrying. I heard you in my parking lot, Sept. 30, 8:10 p.m., young man. Loan and hands out my man's pocket. I got ears and I got a clock. Pastor cleared his throat. Let's remember grace. I looked at him gently and lifted one last page, the Chatham Co-work access log. I read the line that had made my hand shake at noon. H. Wendell Hill, 5:53 p.m., 10/1/24. Pastor, you walked that hallway. If you were there to shepherd, say so, now. A hush like a winter field. His eyes shone, little storms. I was asked to counsel, he managed. I did not read any document. That's fortunate, I said, because the document says residence at 1440 Walden Street and 40% share of Pruitt's catering to Evelyn May Carter. I unfolded the original from its sleeve, and the room leaned forward as if one body. The will's paper sounded like a sail catching wind. For the record, I said, and read aloud, clear as a bell in a small town. By the time I reached the notary line, the youth clapped before their mothers could hush them. Darius's face blotched, then blanched. He lunged again, hand outstretched as if to tear the page. Ruth stepped between us, nurse quick, palm up. She said, like to a child near a stove. Engram appeared in the doorway, tie loosened, voice reedy. Given this presentation, Engram and Slate is withdrawing any immediate motion and recommending all parties respect the later will pending court confirmation. Alana was crying silently into a napkin. She lifted her head, red mouth finally saying something true. He kept an apartment on Bay Street, she whispered. Heads swung. Rent in cash. I found the lease stub in his sock drawer, $2,200 a month. He called it transition. The air changed again. Cooler, cleaner. Pastor set his Bible on the table as if offering it to a scanner. This church cannot be used to launder reputation, he said, voice small but awake. We will hold a board review of the pledge. Darius backed away, shaking his head, palms out, as if the room were a dog. You can't do this to me, he hissed. You can't embarrass me. I folded the will and slid it back into binder A. My hands didn't shake. I didn't embarrass you, Darius, I said. You did that all by your timeline. The sanctuary door opened, and 2 deacons stepped in, faces gray as rain. One murmured to Pastor, the other looked at me, then at the table of papers. A siren wailed somewhere far off, or very near. The siren I heard wasn't for me. It reached the church parking lot at 7:19 p.m., lights pulsing against Shiloh's brick like a guilty heartbeat. 2 officers stepped in, hats in hands, Savannah PD, asking for Mr. Darius Carter. The room parted. Pride makes a lousy shield. "Sir," the taller one said, "we're following up on a report from Coastal Federal Credit Union regarding a large cash transaction and an associated dispute. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Darius tried to smile the way he smiles receipts into ash. "This is a family misunderstanding." "Then you won't mind clarifying," the officer said, eyes on my binder B, which Idella had set on the table like a loaf. Engram cleared his throat from the doorway, tie loosened to humility. "Mr. Carter will not be speaking, and Engram and Slate is withdrawing from representation pending conflict review." Translation: even a retainer looks cheap next to a file full of facts. "Good," I said, because I am old enough to prefer plain talk. I slid across copies. The $85,000, cash stamp, 09/18, 2:37 p.m., the CCTV still, the ledger entry $1,200 to D. Carter Holdings, LLC, and the lease stub Alana now held like a hot coal. Bay Street, $2,200 cash, dates circled in her careful hand. "I am executor named in a later will, filed this morning, 8:31 a.m. Probate, number 24 C 1187. I am requesting, through counsel, a temporary restraining order preventing dissipation of estate assets." Pastor Pale put both palms on the table as if to steady the room. "The board will meet Wednesday, Deci 4, 6 p.m. to review the $10,000 pledge. Until then, no funds will be accepted from any Carter party." Alana exhaled a sound like paper tearing. She lifted her red face. "I'm going to my sister's," she said to no one in particular, to everyone at once. She laid the Bay Street lease copy in front of the officers. He called it transition. I called it cheating on the future. Mrs. Pruitt crossed her arms, apron crisp. "Darius," she said, voice iron with mercy, "you're suspended from Pruitt's pending an audit. Leonard built that kitchen. We won't let you sell the stove out the back door." The shorter officer took the documents, careful as a man in a museum. "We'll open an incident file and coordinate with the county solicitor," he said. "Ma'am," to me, "your attorney can request a freeze on relevant accounts." I nodded, throat thick. I had come to breathe justice, and now it circulated, oxygen in a stale room. Darius found his voice, brittle. "She forged the will." Nina stepped forward and held up her phone, the voice memo cued. Leonard's voice filled the hall, steady, warm, undeniable. "My will for my wife, of my own mind, 10/01/24, 6:12 p.m. The youth clapped again, before their mamas could stop them. When the officers asked him to step outside, Darius went, half-turned, trying to drag dignity behind him like luggage with one bad wheel. On the way past, he leaned toward me just enough to sour the air. "You think they'll love you after this?" he whispered. "Churches love a spectacle. They forget the woman." "At my age," I said, "I don't need love that requires lies." Ruth slid her arm through mine. The hall resumed its breath, a different rhythm. Pastor lifted his Bible and bowed his head, not to bless Darius, not to console me, but as if to ask the book to forgive him for using it as a prop. By Tuesday, Dec 3, 10:12 a.m., my attorney filed for temporary letters of administration. By 2:40 p.m., a judge signed an order to preserve estate assets and scheduled a hearing for Dec 12. The bank flagged the $85,000 withdrawal as part of that order. Pruitt's froze payments to D. Carter Holdings, LLC pending invoices that would never materialize. Engram sent a careful email confirming the 2017 will was superseded by a later instrument. That night, Ruth and I ate catfish at the kitchen table, and Leonard's coat hung on the chair back like a sentinel. I washed the day off my hands and checked the probate portal one last time. The case number glowed on the screen like a small northern star, 24C 1187, steady enough to steer by. At 9:06 p.m., and a text from an unknown number arrived. You won tonight, but you won't win peace. I looked at the clock above the stove and answered the only way I know. Peace isn't a prize, it's proof. On Wednesday, 4:61 p.m., the church board gathered in the small room with the thermostat that lies. They voted to decline Darius's pledge and to issue a statement Sunday. Shiloh would not launder reputations or accept gifts entangled with disputes. Pastor read it aloud, voice smaller, clearer. After the amen, he stayed behind. Evelyn, he said, fingers worrying the corner of a notice, like a man who's realized paper cuts are earned. I was wrong to meet him without telling you. I thought I could broker peace. I only fed secrecy. I need a shepherd who keeps receipts, I said, not unkind. If you want my respect, announce the board's decision yourself from the pulpit. I will, he said, and I saw the learning land. On Thursday, I changed the locks at 1440 Walden, 189-50, receipt stapled behind Walden Truth N2, and called a locksmith to key the back door to match. I hired a CPA to audit Pruitt's prior 6 months, $1,800 retainer I paid from my own savings because justice costs even when you're right. Mrs. Pruitt hugged me hard enough to creak. Leonard married a ledger with a heartbeat, she said, eyes wet. Alana came by at 3:20 p.m., hair pulled back, suitcase in the trunk. She handed me a Ziploc bag of things she'd found. DCH renovations brochures, a USB with photos of staging estimates, and a sheet of paper with Darius's handwriting in thick, impatient strokes. Bay Street. Keep cash only. Church optics good. She didn't sit. I'm leaving him, she said. My mother says failure is when you stay for the wrong reasons. Do you want a cup of tea? I asked, because my mother taught me that exit doors should be lined with gentleness. She nodded, then cried over the steam. He told me I was too soft, she whispered. Maybe that's strength with better manners. If you want work, I said, Pruitt's needs an administrative lead while we audit. Pay isn't glamorous, 18-hour to start, but it's honest, and we keep every receipt. She exhaled a laugh and a sob together. I can do honest. By Friday, the judge's preservation order had done its work. The bank confirmed no further withdrawals. The Bay Street landlord responded to our attorney. Cash payments by Darius, no paper trail, but a lease copy we now had. My inbox chimed with a reply from A. Green, the teller initials from the stamp, forwarded via the bank's counsel confirming the 09/18 transaction and noting Darius's driver's license number and signature on the withdrawal form. The chain was closing like a zipper. N1 inconsistencies, N2 documents, N3 images and testimony, N4 the will. Ruth, off shift, dragged me to the nursery at Shiloh to water plants. You keep saving the world, she said, but I'm going to save this Moses fern. She turned, serious. Forgive me for telling you to take the stipend. I forgive you for being tired, I said. Tired women have kept more ships from sinking than anyone writes about. On Sunday, Pastor stood in the pulpit and read the board's statement. He did not say my name or Darius's. He said integrity and let it ring. Then he asked me to speak. I walked up slow, felt the weight of the camel coat, not on my arm, but behind me the way a witness stands, and I said, at my age, I don't shout. I document, and I set boundaries. Boundaries looked like this. I filed change of address and notice to creditors for the estate. I set up a separate estate account at Coastal Federal with dual signatures, mine and the CPA's, because transparency isn't a feeling. It's a ledger. I told Engram and Slate to send all communications to my attorney. I told Darius through counsel that any contact must be written. I put Leonard's 40% of Pruitt's in a trust with Ruth as successor trustee, because legacy should be boring and sturdy. That afternoon, I found the camellia Leonard had bought and never planted. Debutante, pale pink like a blessing that doesn't brag. I set it by the porch with a trowel and a date, 12/8/24, written on the plant tag in black permanent marker. I dug with careful hands, the way you fold a letter you plan to keep. As the sun slipped under the live oaks, a text pinged from a new number. Hearing deck 12, 9 a.m., probate confirmation, bring originals. Devon, probate clerk. I wiped my palms, went inside, and slid the original will into binder A. The clock over the stove ticked like a quiet standing ovation. Thursday, December 12th, 9:01 a.m. Courtroom 3B smelled of wood polish and nerves. Devon sat behind glass with that clerk calm. The judge took the bench, glasses low. My attorney rose. I rose. Darius didn't show. His new counsel sent a letter instead. No objection to the later will. Reservation of rights on issues unrelated to probate. That last phrase tried to sound brave and only sounded tired. The judge read the line we had bled toward. The court finds the October 1st, 2024 will valid and duly executed. Letters testamentary shall issue to Evelyn May Carter. The stamp came down. Solid, ordinary, divine. Outside, in air that carried a taste like rain held its breath, I called Ruth. She whooped in a nurse's whisper and promised collards and cornbread for dinner and a night without paperwork. Nina texted a single word, Amen. At Pruitt's, I met the staff and opened the audit results. No more surprises, just a lot of sweeping. We canceled D. Carter Holdings as a vendor, negotiated with suppliers, and reset the books. I ordered new apron sets in Leonard's favorite red, $14.99 each, because pride can be worn if you stitch it quiet. Alana arrived with a planner, color tabs already marching. She set $50 of her own money in the youth tip jar by the warmer. She didn't make a speech. At home, I took Leonard's camel coat from the chair, back where it had hung like a witness, and laid it across my bed. I stitched the lining closed with small, even loops, white thread on tan, the seam I'd torn to find my life now mended by the same hands. The key card to Chatham Cowork lay on my dresser. I put it in a small dish with a paperclip, a seashell, and my wedding band from January 7, 2020, the ordinary reliquary of a kitchen widow who likes her altars within reach. I wrote letters to Devon at probate, to A. Green at the bank, to Pastor, not to scold, but to thank him for saying integrity out loud. I paid the CPA and stapled the receipt. Paid $1,800. I filed everything in Walden Truth, then renamed the folder Walden Kept. It felt like moving a chair from a hallway into a home. Late afternoon, I carried the debutante camellia to the hole I dug by the porch. The earth smelled wet and sure. I pressed soil around the roots and tucked in the tag with the date. Ruth stood on the steps with 2 mugs. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That he hid a will in a hem," I said, and I read it out loud. She laughed, because the truth sometimes sounds like a punchline after you've survived the joke. "You going to keep the coat?" "I'm going to wear it to church," I said. "The day we dedicate the youth wing to someone who washed dishes instead of their name." We stood there until the streetlights came on, and the camellia looked like a small moon caught low in the yard. A breeze lifted the hem of my dress, the way Leonard used to do with 2 fingers when he wanted to make me look down and laugh. Inside, I hung the coat by the door. I touched the pocket where the will had rested like a heart. I spoke to the empty room the way women my age are allowed to speak to air. "At my age, I don't shout," I said. "I document, and then I plant." If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.